Hey, so the obvious thing to talk about today are these tweets from Kanye where he clarified his political views. And I've actually made this video a few times trying to take different angles on it. And I think really what I want to address is the response to these so far and what maybe caused them to come about today. Like, why today did Kanye choose to clarify his political stance? And you can get a little teaser of that by the tabs that are open. Um, Personally, I'm not surprised by any of this. You know, Travis and I doing the podcast, doing these videos, we know probably more than anybody should about what Kanye has said in the public sphere. Every tweet, every interview, every announcement, we've watched. So everything that he said in these tweets, I think lines up with just stuff that he's been saying. It's just, you would have to hear this interview here and this interview here and recall this line from Ye versus the People. And when you add all those things up, also knowing what he said like 3 years ago here, yeah, of course, this is how he feels. But if you're not on that level of knowing everything that Kanye's said and done, I think you're wanting clarification in a more straightforward way rather than having like a trail of breadcrumbs or puzzle pieces that you have to put together and be like, that's what Kanye's thinking? That? Instead, it's just, yeah, this is what he's thinking. And there were people that had no idea what he was thinking and were just reading the headlines and were horrified. Some people that had the middle amount of information and were iffy, and I think a lot of those people, and even fans that had more context but still weren't happy with things, that these words here, Kanye clarifying his political stance, was very comforting for a lot of people. There were a lot saying just, this makes me happy. I'm so relieved to hear this. I can like proudly be a Kanye fan again. Things of that nature. People just saying like, really, thank you, Ye. It's important to hear this. And then it's kind of funny. You look at this tweet here, 27,000 comments, very politically divisive. There's people from the right who had just been praising Kanye for months because of his Trump support, now saying that he's capitulated, that he's running away, he's going back to the plantation. Oh, Kanye. Then you have people on the left who are saying like, too little, too late. Just go take your meds. How often does Kanye opening his eyes and coming to these realizations? Why should we buy this? It's just really absurd the other way. Like, I would just hope that there would be people that would say like, oh, okay, so you went through something, you thought you were doing the right thing, and I guess you realized you didn't. You know, a lot of us had issues with it. We're glad that we're on the same page now, and really wish you the best of luck moving forward. That middle ground, and I think you those of you who watch the channel regularly know that I'm very much for the middle ground, that there can be bad things, but we can acknowledge the good things as well. I think that opinion, at least of that tweet, has been few and far between, that there's still good people on each side that are being very divisive. And that was the whole problem that Kanye wanted to address to begin with. He said he put the hat on because he wanted to be like the Crip reaching out to the blood, or the blood reaching out to the Crip. The blue and the red and the blue, somebody reaching across and shaking the hand of the other to establish the common humanity between the two. And Kanye said that our political culture in America right now is too divided, and him putting on the hat was trying to be a olive branch from one side to the other, and trying to show people that the hat didn't necessarily mean what they thought it meant. So many viewed it as a symbol of hate. There have been a ton of people that have called it the new KKK hood. And Kanye, who I think from his perspective, not to speak for him, but we would know that he's far from that. I mean, this is Ye, right? This is the guy that called out George Bush. This is the guy that did College Dropouts and all these other songs talking about the Black experience and very progressive and humanizing in his views, he's putting on the hat. And for him, I think he's saying, like, if I'm putting on the hat doesn't mean what you think it means. Like, the hat is just a fucking hat, and it has the energy that the person brings to it, which is why he's been saying, I changed the energy of the hats. It was a sign of hate. Now it's a sign of love. But so many people, my nose is itching, so many people just kept seeing it as a sign of hate. And that instead of Kanye wearing it, changing the energy, that the hat changed Kanye's energy. And that he now must represent all the evil and woes that they think the hat represents. Which, you go about trying to bring people together and have an olive branch, and it just ends up causing division. And I think there are some people that have been saying, like, why did he do this anyway? Or, like, what was this all for? And I think even if in the short term there's not much that was gained from it, or even in the long term there's not much that was gained, I also don't think much was lost. I think that there are a lot of people over dramatizing the damage that Kanye caused. I've seen a lot of people in that thread saying, like, the damage is done, like, you caused enough, like, pain and suffering. Did he really? Like, is anybody really just, like, suffering that it's going to be lasting and lasting? Like, I feel like 6 months from now, if Kanye's not talking politics, nobody's really talking about it in the same way, in that way that is more just kind of this experiment. And I think our current political climate is such that there's so many extremes. Everybody's just polarized between the two ends of the spectrum. And you have somebody like George Clooney that would just be like, hey, Trump, fuck you. And a bunch of people would be like, yeah, that's it, George. But then people on the right would just be like, we feel attacked. Like, of course they're going to hate on us and not understand. It might sound good what Clooney would say if Clooney said something like that. And we, as people that aren't in support of Trump's politics, might be happy that somebody is saying that and speaking up. But does it actually accomplish anything in the short term or in the long term? Whereas Kanye, trying to reach across the aisle, trying to build a rapport with Trump and have conversations with Trump about policies from Kanye's perspective. Before he went to the White House, Kanye had met with one of the progressive Democratic Chicago mayoral candidates. I'm blanking on her name, which is why I phrased it like that. Amara Enya. I made a whole video about it. But he met with her, and she was the one that talked with him about prison reform, mental health care, school reform, education reform, prison reform. I might have said that already, a few other topics. And those were the same topics that Kanye then took to Trump and was saying, hey, we want this, an end to stop and frisk. Like, will you give us this? And of course, there's going to be a give and take with that dynamic. People on the right took that and put their own spin on it. People on the left were saying that Kanye was just being used. It was a photo op for Trump. He got to have a talking point out of it. But I think you go into something like that knowing that, of course, there's going to be a cost to it. It's not just going to be this win-win situation as you're going into the Dragon's Lair. But you're hoping that in the long term, if Kanye can get Trump to view him in a humanized way and have compassion for his causes, maybe the guy's not as bad as everybody thinks. And we saw maybe something to that in the fact that after Kanye met with Trump, they talked about prison reform, and Trump, like Jeff Sessions, wanted to do it one way. And Trump was like, no, I'm going to side with Kanye on this. And if Sessions doesn't like it, he can deal with it because I'm the president. And would anything actually come to that? Or like, if push come to shove, would Trump actually side with Kanye? Maybe not. Maybe it would all be for naught. But at the same time, it could happen. And I think Kanye taking that risk was at least worthwhile in some way, more so than if just some celebrity were to be like, fuck Trump. That Kanye at least got close to that humanization and humanity. It reminds me, there's this guy, Daryl Davis. He's a black musician in some southern state, and he's known for the fact that he's gotten 200 Ku Klux Klan members to turn in their robes. And when Davis meets these people, they're full-fledged KKK members, and they should hate him, and a lot do hate him. But through his persistence, the conversations he has, the relationships he builds with them, they discover that shared humanity, and these people who were just monsters wearing robes become humanized to Davis. And these people that saw Davis as not human now have a completely different opinion. And I think it's Davis recognizes that these might not inherently be evil people, but they're the results of the experiences that they've had. And if they've lacked an actual friendship and relationship with somebody like him, and he enters into their life and gives them that context that they had lacked, change occurs. And somebody that had been on a path leading to more and more evil now goes the opposite direction and is on something that's more beneficial to humanity as a whole, and recognizing that skin and nationality and all that is just bullshit. We're all people. So that's why I appreciate Kanye trying to have the conversation. Are there still cons to that? Absolutely. Are there pros, though, that people haven't been talking about? Absolutely. And I think it frustrates me that so many of the cons were brought up without any of the pros, and that some people just assume that the cons make it not worthwhile in the short term, even if in the long term there could have been more beneficial results. So that's how I feel about all of that. And getting into the specifics of some of the things he said, I support creating jobs and opportunities for people who need them the most. I support prison reform. I support common sense gun laws that will make our world safer. All of that seems very safe and normal and fine. I support those who risk their lives to serve and protect us, police, soldiers, firefighters, and I support holding people who misuse their power accountable. Police, soldiers, politicians. I think that's a very fair statement to make. I think almost everybody can agree that that's a good thing. I believe in love and compassion for people seeking asylum and parents who are fighting to protect their children from violence and war. I think most people would agree that's a good thing. There's a segment of people that would disagree, and we're going to come back to this in just a second. I would like to thank my family, loved ones, and community for supporting my actual beliefs and my vision for a better world. Actual capitalized for everything that we were just talking about. So many people in the media and so many of the pundits and voices, the verified people on Twitter, have been misrepresenting what Kanye said. And by doing so, by just misquoting him or not providing context or not understanding the context in which something was said. Like, there's still people saying that Kanye said slavery was a choice, which he never said that. He said, when you hear about slavery for 400 years, that sounds like a choice, which is different. You know, slavery was a choice looks at that 200-year segment between the founding of America and the end of the Civil War and the emancipation of slaves and making them citizens and giving voting rights and all of that. Saying that was a choice that the slaves made to be enslaved is one thing. Saying 400 years, which encompasses the 1600s to the present day, of slavery sounds like a choice. There's a whole different context that gets into. It gets into the fact that we had a chapter of physical slavery followed by, and this was some of the context that Kanye was trying to get into, mental prisons and mental slavery, whether that's through monolithic thoughts, that you have to think a certain way to be part of a group, otherwise you're kicked out, whether that's consumerism, religion, those kind of cultural things that get back to monolithic thoughts are trying to influence us to act and behave a certain way because that's what society demands of us for no other reason than just that's what society demands of us. It would be like if you lived in New York, you don't have to be a Yankees fan. You can not like baseball. You can be a Detroit Tigers fan, and nobody's going to be like, get the fuck out of the city. Get the fuck out of the city. But there are certain things that aren't murder, aren't rape, aren't any of that. Just Kanye wearing the hats. And suddenly people say that he's not black, that he's now hateful and hating, and that he's canceled and all of that. Like, that seems kind of absurd to me. But he's getting into this idea, especially then, oh God, I'm jumping around, but consumerism. And that's something that he's talked about on All Falls Down, New Slave, St. Pablo, Yay, Kids See Ghosts, that mental prison aspect of consumerism and culture. Consumerism. We think that we have to buy these things. Like everybody has to have the newest iPhone. You have to have this car. You have to dress a certain way. All these kinds of beliefs that are installed in us that we don't often question. So when he brings up 400 years of that, it seems more like, why has America been choosing to have some form of slavery in it? And what does that mean? More so than just blaming slaves and saying, you chose this, you chose this. I don't think that that's without criticism. And it's not a point of view that shouldn't be attacked or is beyond criticism or debate. I'm just saying it's very different than saying those 200 years of physical slavery were a choice by the slaves. And so many people are quoting that way of saying it than the way in which he actually said it, which gets into just the little ways that what he said has been misrepresented. So that's what he meant by actual, I think. But then he went on an hour later to say, I introduced Candace, and this is Candace Owens, to the person who made the logo, and they didn't want their name on it. And this is the logo for Candace Owens' newest movement, Blexit, which is named after the Great Britain or the UK movement, Brexit, which called for the UK to leave the European Union, which was something, the brainchild of some of the right-wing thinkers like Nigel Farage and Steve Bannon, that's now causing some chaos in the UK. But Candace has appropriated that word but applied it to Black Americans leaving the Democratic Party for the Republican Party. The designer didn't want their name on it, so she used mine. I never wanted any association with Blexit. Very clear there. I have nothing to do with it. My eyes are now wide open, and we'll come back to that in a second. My eyes are now wide open and now realize I've been used to spread messages I don't believe in. I am distancing myself from politics and completely focusing on being creative. And being creative, I think, isn't just music, it isn't just fashion, but it's getting into creative problem solving. It's getting into using what he's amazing at, which is this creative approach to things, and drawing from all these different sources and knowledge pools and applying that to problem solving. Creativity is problem solving. So I think he's still planning on working in culture and changing the world, whether that's housing, whether that's education. I just don't think he's going to be speaking out about politics as much. But also saying that I've been used to spread messages I don't believe in, I think it's back to that give and take. He thought that if he stepped forward with love, that people would respond accordingly, or that there weren't necessarily wrong answers, so to speak. Like, people are just trying to do their best, and he can have conversations, can have relationships, can show love, but that doesn't mean that he supports those things. But when it's gotten to this point months later where he's being used to spread messages he doesn't believe in, that seems to be the line where he's like, I can't continue to be used in this way. Whatever good I think I could do, I'm not comfortable with what's happening. And I think there might be one of four reasons that Kanye decided to talk about this today. One, and that gets back to, I believe in love and compassion for people seeking asylum and parents who are fighting to protect their children from violence and war. Today, Trump announced that he wants to get rid of the 14th Amendment via executive order. And the 14th Amendment was the amendment that was enacted in 1968 and said all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. And that amendment is responsible for so many people in America today being citizens. Like not my grandparents, but my great-grandparents came from Yugoslavia and Russia, and they were immigrants, and my grandparents then were the first generation. And I don't think my great-grandparents were ever citizens. They just were immigrants. And it was my grandparents that were then citizens through the 14th Amendment. And I think many, many, many people today that are here are from those migrations, from Europe, from the Middle East, from South America, from Canada, that all came to America in the end of the 1800s, in the 20th century, that made us one of the greatest countries to have ever existed because we're such a melting pot of ideas and cultures coming together and taking best practices from each other. And the results have been amazing. Trump's family is from Hallstatt, Germany. I watched a documentary about it at the Portland Film Festival. And I think it was his grandpa was the one that came over. And Trump's dad was born here. Or maybe Trump's dad wasn't even born here. Trump's dad was also an immigrant. And it was Trump was the first American citizen. It's something like that. It's either him or his father that mosquito. It was either him or his father that were the first citizens here because of the 14th Amendment, not because they became citizens and then their kids became citizens. So him wanting to get rid of that could be a bridge too far for Kanye. I know there'll be people that'll be like, migrant camps weren't the bridge too far, like putting children in prison wasn't the bridge too far. I think that's that's a bridge too far for me. But Kanye may have thought, maybe I can get in there, do some good, talk with them, and like put an end to that, put an end to this. Or he may not have even been aware of it or thought it was as big of a deal as it was. Who knows? He could not think this is a big deal. But given what he said in the tweets, I believe in love and compassion for people seeking asylum and parents who are fighting to protect their children from violence and war. I could see this and the migrant camps being on his mind, and both of those things just being like, I can't deal with this level of anti-immigration and fear-mongering about immigration. So there's that potential. The next one has to do with Candace Owens. I introduced Candace to the person who made the logo, and they didn't want their name on it. Yesterday, the story started breaking about Kanye designing these shirts that you see right here. And the headlines were very similar to this. Kanye West Blexit clothing line wants black Dems to leave party. That it was Kanye's clothing line, that he was part of this movement either with Candace Owens or that she was with it with him. But they were collapsing Kanye into this. And that's not accurate. Designing the merchandise doesn't mean that he's part of the movement, for the movement. But I can see where that, perception of it would come from. I mean, Kanye's whole political journey kicked off in April when he said, "I like the way Candace Owens thinks," which had everybody going like, wait, what? She's the one that's like pushing all these kind of extreme topics and being very extreme about the treatment of blacks by Democrats, and whitewashing might not be the right word, but playing down what the right has done to minorities over the last 50 years. How could Kanye appreciate that thought? That's what really got people going. And then all the Trump stuff followed a few days later. We've seen Kanye with Candace numerous times. She seems to be at a lot of events with him. And I feel like there were times during a lot of his speeches over the last 6 months that were points that you're like, I bet that came from Candace rather than, say, T.I. or Talib Kweli or Kim. So their closeness over the last 6 months, and this being in line with Kanye saying not all black people have to be Democrats, I think you could logically be like, well, of course, this is the next step for him. And just to clarify that statement and the support of Candace Owens, to me, it seems more that Kanye views non-monolithic thought as progressive. And we can see from his political stances, he's very progressive, even though these are very reasonable things. We know that he's a futurist. We know that he's concerned with the future of technology and society and housing and people and mental health and schools and education. He wants things to grow and develop. A lot of people put his support of Candace Owens in more of the conservative vein. And I think it just has more to do with him thinking that freedom of thought is progressive. And this idea that we don't all have to be one thing to be part of the group, that you can still be part of the group and not have the same political affiliation. Though I guess even within the Democratic Party, you don't have to all think the same way and agree. There are some Democrats that are fiscally conservative. There are some conservatives that are socially democratic, but they're still part of those parties. I think Kanye, that's what he preferred. Not necessarily the rhetoric, not necessarily the politics of it, but just we don't all have to be this one thing, and that's okay. Though the timing of it, definitely not. It's a problematic time for that kind of speech to be coming out, given how divisive the parties are and what's at stake in this current election. But I don't necessarily think that he was coming at it from this perspective of, I'm going to stir up controversy. And then when all this controversy started stirring up and he's being described as the head of this movement, he comes in and shuts it down. And Candace Owens was even forced to tweet out, and I lost the tweet and I hate scrolling through her timeline. Here. Blexit is about the beautiful stories of so many black people who have awakened themselves to the possibilities of our future as Americans. The press is trying to use Kanye's name to create drama and further divisiveness, which is wrong. Here's my statement of clarity from me. Today, the press is trying to conflate Kanye West with Blexit to get website clicks, so allow me to clarify my earlier statement. I said on stage that my friend and fellow superhero helped me design the X for Blexit. This may shock the world, but Ye is a world-renowned designer. Everyone who knows him asks him for advice on design. Ye supports various people in different regards because at the end of the day, his message is about unity and love. While I may disagree with almost everything Candace Owens says, I think what she says in this statement, and I do think she's smart, which infuriates me as well that she then takes the stances she takes, but I do appreciate how she frames this and how she presents Kanye, because I think it's very accurate rather than presenting it in a way that benefits her. He supports Colin Kaepernick. He supports Amara Enya. That's who I was trying to think of. He has said he loves Hillary Clinton. He has said he loves Donald Trump. Blexit is a project that is mine entirely. I am blessed that Ye introduced me to a designer who, despite having totally different political beliefs than me, helped me craft some beautiful letters that I used on the Blexit caps. The insinuation that Kanye is now the author, which I guess you can't see this, the author of my political movement is pointedly wrong and dishonest. Let's not politicize love. And you can see a little bit of a twist in the story. She had said on stage that Ye helped her design the X, which then made people think Ye was involved in Blexit, and he had retweeted the design. So that furthered the notion that he was involved. But it turns out she reveals that he just introduced her to a designer. It wasn't necessarily his design. He had nothing to do with it. He goes on to say, I just introduced them. Like, so she used his name because the guy didn't want anything to do with it, as he has a different political affiliation. Yeah, so it might be that Kanye was either fed up with Trump or he was fed up with people misrepresenting what he believes in and what movements that he's a part of. So he just laid it all out on the record. There's also this interview that Kim Kardashian did, and that interview aired last night. It was with Van Jones on the show The Messy Truth, Van's show, and Kim had a lot to say. She said, I always say this, I don't know why my nose is so itchy. I'm so sorry. It takes him about 4 years to write a song to communicate what he wants to say, which, yeah. So when he tweets something in 2 seconds, what's going on in his mind and what he thinks and what he's trying to say, he might not be the best communicator, but he has the best heart and I know what he means. I believe in him, and I believe that his message of what the hat represents to him is maybe different than what it represents to other people, which he said a lot. He is very mindful about that. Maybe he doesn't express that. He does. But what it means to him is something totally different, and I trust in him that he will explain that in his own way. And she goes on to say that, at SNL, what do people want her to do? Go up on stage and sing? She listens to him, and afterwards I might let him know that I can help him communicate that a little bit better, and we should work on that. And he's like, oh yeah, but I already tweeted it. And I'm like, well, what you tweeted isn't what you just said to me over the phone. But sometimes people don't have the long time to really hear him out and see what he has to say, which I just think it reminds me of with my own fiance, things I'll say, and she'll be like, that's not, and very much helps me say what I mean or do what I mean, or just corrects my imbecilic behavior sometimes. So that just gave me a good laugh. But she says that he's so strong and that he knows what he means, and people around him know what he means. And the people around him let him know that what he said might not be what he means and try to help him work on it. But I know his heart, so we are working on expressing that. And real fast, I like that she talks here. We've been through a lot together. I've known him for 15 years. They became friends in 2006 or 7. He's put himself up against the world for me when everyone told him you cannot date a girl with a sex tape. You cannot date a reality show girl. It's going to ruin your career. Everyone told him that. And to me, he was like, they're not going to tell me what to do. Like, it's going to be okay. He was always that strength for me, so I'll always love and appreciate him for always standing up for me. So that's why Kim continues to support Kanye. But at the same time, I think this also could have been an impetus. As we know, Kanye loves Kim. I'm guessing he would read the interview or watch the interview, and having to see your wife go up there and defend your communication again and again and defend your political stance again and again. There have been people calling out for her to explain Kanye for months. Every time he says something, people are like, Kim, what's that? Which is just, one, presumptuous as fuck. Like, they don't owe any of us shit. They can have all these conversations in private. We're not entitled to that just because they're celebrities. But people think that, and it puts that pressure on Kim. And it could be that Kanye reads this interview and is just like, fuck. The same thing after TMZ. The pressure that put on Kim because of Kanye resulted in Ye and specifically wouldn't leave and no mistakes. that he needs to be better and do better for Kim because he knows that he has her love and support and wants to return that love and support in the best way that he can. So I could easily imagine these words giving him pause and just being like, I can't rely on her to always be explaining this. I need to just go out and tell people how I feel in the most concise and clear manner that I can, which is this. The last thing, and I wish I could find the tweets. When he first tweeted this, it was really easy to see. And now that so many people have been commenting, I'm not discovering it at this point. But some of these tweets are pretty funny to me, though some are infuriating, especially in this one. One of the guys from Pod Save America, which is a left-leaning political podcast that's been very critical of the right, but the guys are very smart. I have a lot of respect for them. I think they worked in the Obama White House. One of them might have been one of the speechwriters for Obama. I think there's 3. One of them, Tom, commented on one of these tweets and said, "Mission accomplished." And a producer from that podcast then commented with, "I'm so happy you were the one that got him to see this." And then a third commented with, "I just think congratulations," or a joke or something that seemed to support the other two. I don't know enough about the podcast that maybe that's an inside joke and they're just having a laugh at it. Or if Kanye would have seriously had a conversation with Tom and it resulted in Tom explaining things from that point of view that got through to Kanye and resulted in him clarifying these tweets. I tweeted at all of them, like, please explain, and none of them responded. So if you maybe listen to that podcast and can provide some context, I'd appreciate that. I'm not sure, but I'm very curious. So it could be one of those 4 things, all of those things, a mixture of some, none of those things. It could be something else entirely that caused Kanye to tweet these things today. But I just thought that context might be important and that some people might wonder what could have caused this, which is why all that just happened. But I think that does it for this video. Moving forward, I don't know what to expect. You know, it could be that Kanye jumps back into politics next week. It could just be that he moves in silence and causes immense change just through the shit that he's working on, not worried about promulgating what's going on. I don't know. I'm excited to see. I'm excited to have those conversations with you all. And we're on this yay ride. And I'm enjoying the hell out of it. We live in an exciting time. This is going to be an artist and a figure that people are talking about for generations. So it's cool that we get to be here witnessing this, being part of the conversation, and being part of the legacy of him and shaping the conversation around him for the future. So I appreciate all of that discussion with y'all, and have another video tomorrow. All right, cheers.